Hey guys, Lee with LG Speed and Custom here, and in this video we are doing running boards on my 32 Ford sedan. So in the last video we epoxied the fenders, bolted the fenders back on, put some frame webbing in between. This video, we're gonna handle the running boards. So I got this idea for the running boards. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I finally have a car where it's appropriate to do. I wanna do tuck and roll running boards, upholstered running boards. I think it's so cool. It's a look that I've really liked for a long time. Just never had the right car that it would suit. The 47 Ford that I had, it had inboard running boards. They weren't actually visible from the outside of the vehicle, so it didn't really make sense on that. The Roadster doesn't have running boards, so anyways, we got a little bit of work to do to these running boards, sort of. This running board, it's fine. It's in really nice shape. Don't have to do anything to it. This one has a little bit of a crunch right here. I don't know if somebody like drove over something and like a rock landed right there, but it's got a little bit of a bow. There's a weld here, and this radius has just been pushed in ever so slightly. So to start, we're gonna work that out and get this running board pretty straight. It doesn't have to be perfect. Upholstery covers a lot of stuff, so like we don't need to metal finish this to absolute perfection. We just gotta get it roughly back in the shape again. After that, we're gonna give them just a quick cover with like, I use this KBS seal. It's kind of like Core 15, just a different brand. And it's like a paint over rust kind of sealant paint. So it's black, not that it matters because you won't see that. So yeah, once we get those painted, we'll let them dry and then we'll figure out the upholstery. So with the running board up on the bench here, you can see that we're nice and flat there, but as we get to the center, this big gap opens up. And now that I'm sitting here looking at it, I think a lot of that isn't so much that this is bent up, but rather that it's bent in. If you look down the side here, you can see we got a nice radius, and then starting right about here, it's like almost like a 90 degree. So I think the first thing that we're gonna do is just start working this back out and get it to the right shape. And I'm hoping that as this comes out, this edge will settle down a bit. I've turned the running board on its side, and you can really see that area that needs to be worked. So I marked out where, like we're flat along there, so I marked where the damage starts and kind of where it ends. Just gonna tackle it with I got a ball peen hammer, and we'll just try to roll it over and see what happens. We've got this like 80% better. It's not totally perfect, but it's perfect enough for upholstery. Let's move it outside and we'll give it a quick wire wheel just to get any of this little scaly stuff off. Courtney was here, and then we'll paint it black. We're all set up outside. I don't like wire wheeling stuff inside because it's really messy. Fills the whole shop with big orange haze. Got our wire wheel attached to our grinder. Just gonna wire wheel it all up. So this is the KBS seal. Just took it off the paint shaker. Like I mentioned earlier, this is kind of like just a different brand of Pour 15. I actually watched a pretty cool YouTube video, I don't know, a year or two ago, where they took like all the different rust paints from like Rust-Oleum, Pour 15, KBS, and they did like a series of like tests to see how durable they were. And the one that won, I don't remember what it was, isn't available here in Canada, unfortunately. But the KBS seal did slightly better than the Pour 15. I got the running boards hanging on the forklift outside right now. Let's go paint them. Well, those are all done. I guess we'll just let them dry and probably pick this project up next weekend. Well, it's like five days later. It's 5 days later now, and these are nice and dry. Ready to start laying out our upholstery design. We need to make a pattern off of this, so that's what we're gonna do next. I'm gonna be doing 2-inch tuck and roll on this. So, two things, tuck and roll and pleats. What's the difference? We've talked about this before with other upholstery projects, but for new people watching the channel that may not know, pleats and tuck and roll often get confused because they're very similar. But the main difference is with pleats, you can see the stitch. You can actually see the actual thread holding it together. Tuck and roll, you cannot. Tuck and roll, to get rid of that stitch, requires a little bit more material and an extra step, therefore making it more expensive to do, which is why pleats are the more popular one. Just it's an economical thing. Aesthetics wise, I think they both look great. I prefer tuck and roll because it's just that little bit cooler. It's like a little bit extra street cred. We're gonna do 2-inch, like I said, and how we've determined 2-inch is the era that I'm building this car to. I want it to look like it was built in, like, say from like a 1958 to 1962 time frame, kind of like late 50s, early 60s style. Pleats or tuck and roll or whatever you want to call it, the lines in your upholstery, as time went on, they got skinnier. If you look at like a seat that was upholstered in the 30s, like in a, say like a 30s Packard, for example, they got big pleats, like 5 inches in between them. By the 40s, they got down to 3 inches. By the early 50s, they were like 2.5 inches. By the late 50s, early 60s, you know, we're at a 2-inch, and then say like early 60s to mid 60s, they got really skinny, like up to 1 inch. So obviously, the skinnier they get, the more pleats you're gonna have to sew, so the more work it is. And also another thing when you get with the skinnier ones is kind of like pinstriping. If you draw like one straight line, awesome. Now draw a second parallel line right beside it and get them exactly the same. That's really hard. With pleats, when you get down to like 1 inch, if you're running it through the sewing machine and you like sneeze and it kind of goes like that, boom, you're gonna see that big time, because right on each side of it is going to be another straight line. When you got them spaced out a little bit further, that little warble, or if you get a little crooked in your sewing, not as noticeable as when they're super close together. So that's another reason why I went with 2 inches. It's just got a little bit more room for error. I did a quick measurement, and we are, I think, 41 inches or 42 inches total. So that means we should be able to get 11. Is that right math? Is that right English? Anyways, just to like double check to make sure, I've got just a piece of plastic that I cut out. I cut this at like 1 11/16, and the reason being when I put it on here and then draw my line, move it to the next side and draw my line. The reason it's at 11/16 instead of 2 inches is to take up for the width of my grease pencil. So if we measure this now, we are, boom, 2 inches. So I'm just gonna quickly kind of lay this out and see, just to make sure that my math is correct. And from there, we'll make our pattern. Okay, we've got all our lines drawn out here. I realized that I said 11 earlier, and I realized right away that was wrong, but I don't know, I'm good at math, but when the camera's rolling and I gotta do math on camera, I'm just like, oh. Anyways, it's 21. We got 21 of these guys, not 11, which means we're gonna have 20 lines that we have to sew in here. So now that we know that, let's do our pattern. Probably gonna make this out of 3 pieces. We'll have our top plate that's gonna roll right around and underneath so that our pleats just continue right around underneath like that. We'll probably put some piping where this ridge is, and then we'll have a second and third piece on the back side that are gonna go on the edge right here and come down that way. And they're more or less just gonna get sandwiched in there, and the piping will be like the finished visible edge that you see. This is just gonna be in there to like hold the running board or the upholstery onto the running board. This end here, we'll just bring it back to this edge and it will get sandwiched in between the frame with these bolt holes here. It'll be great. I'm making this so that it's easy to remove, because you're probably not gonna believe this, but white tuck and roll running boards probably isn't gonna last that long. This might be something that we have to like redo every 2, maybe 3 years, maybe even less than that, I don't know, but I'm keeping that in mind as I do that we wanna make this so that they're easy to get on and easy to get off, so that when they are deteriorated and worn out, it's no big deal to take them off and replace them with new ones. And that probably sounds weird to you guys, but in upholstery, like, that happens all the time. My dad, for example, he was a truck driver, had his own trucks, and liked to customize his trucks. He'd have polished aluminum fuel tanks, and on the front of his fuel tanks, he used to have diamond pleated covers that would slide over that they did 2 things. They protected the front of the fuel tank from stone chips, but they also looked really cool. They were a thing that like every year or so, you had to replace them. It's just a thing. Boats. When I worked at an upholstery shop, we'd have so many white boat interiors come in that were like a couple years old, and you just got to replace them. It's just part of it. I've accepted that. I'm going into it knowing that, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to look so good until it doesn't, and then we'll just take them off and redo them, and it's going to look good again. I've just drawn some lineup marks here, and what those are going to do is when we're going to transfer these marks onto our pattern, and then they'll eventually get transferred onto our 2 pieces. And that way, when we sew them together, you know, this piece will have that mark on it, this piece will have that mark on it, and when we're sewing it together, we want these marks to line up. And as long as they're lined up, then we know that we are in the correct spot. We're not too far forward or too far back. You know, picking up what I'm saying? So we did that on this panel, and then again on this panel here. So to make our pattern, I just use plastic. This particular plastic is when you order material like upholstery, vinyl, fabric, foam, etc. It always comes wrapped in this plastic from the shippers. So I keep it, and it is perfect for making patterns out of. These are just magnets that I'm using to hold it on here. We'll just put some magnets all around to hold it down, and then trace out our shape that we need. Pretty similar to metal shaping. Metal shaping and upholstery kind of has a lot of the same theory. Obviously, material like vinyl is so much easier to manipulate than sheet metal. Okay, we'll grab a Sharpie now and do our trace. First thing I'm gonna do is transfer the lineup marks onto here. That way, if this gets bumped or moved around or something, we know where to put it or where it's supposed to go. The other reason I like using this clear plastic is it makes it really easy to like see your marks. I'm also gonna go ahead and do our bolt holes. And once all our bolt holes are done, just gonna trace the overall shape. The whole perimeter is traced. Our lineup marks are on there. Our holes are marked on there, so we know where to punch our holes for the bolts to go through. Just gonna go ahead and do the same thing for our side pieces. Obviously, that's just gonna be a little piece of plastic, not a big piece of plastic, but same theory. Patterns are all cut out. I've labeled them. That's DRFR for driver's running board front. And this is the front of the running board. Cool thing with these patterns is when we're done, this fender or running board, we can flip them over, mirror image, and do the passenger side. So you can see it sits right on there like that. We got our bolt holes marked. We've got our lineup marks to line up with these ones here. We're ready to start cutting this out. One quick last thing before we run upstairs and start cutting this out of material is I wrote down that we're gonna be sewing 20 lines in, and I just drew on the template here where our center line is gonna be. So if we do 20 lines, working out this way and this way towards the edge. Welcome to the upholstery loft. We are up on the second floor of the shop. We got a mezzanine up here set up for doing upholstery work. This is the material that I want to do the running boards out of. This is just a pearl white vinyl. Really a big fan of this stuff. I've used it a lot. We did Shannon's Comet interior in this stuff. So we're gonna put our patterns down and trace them out, right? Wrong, because we're going tuck and roll. If we were just gonna do pleats, that'd be no big deal. We can just trace this out, draw our lines, sew them in, and we're done. Because, as I mentioned earlier, the difference between tuck and roll is tuck and roll and pleats. Pleats, you can see the stitch. Tuck and roll, you cannot. So if we were gonna pleat this, we would just put our sew foam behind it, which is what gives it its depth, stitch our line in, boom, we're done. But we don't want to see our stitch. We want true tuck and roll where the stitch is hidden. So to do that, you put your stitch in just like regular pleating, right? Then you fold it in half on your stitch and you sew it again on the back side. And then when you open it up, that stitch is hidden. It's completely hidden. Because that happens, you see this little tail in here, this excess, that accounts for 3/4 of an inch. So if we're sewing 20 lines in here, each one of those lines is gonna suck up 3/4 of an inch of material. That means we're gonna have to make this piece like almost 20 inches longer than what we need so that when we sew it together, it shrinks down to this size. So I just shut the camera off, did some math, and then turned the camera back on once my math was figured out. So this was 42 inches, right? And then we do 20 lines, and each line is gonna suck up 3/4 of an inch. That's 15 inches. So if we take our 22 inches plus 15 inches, that lands us at 57 inches. I'm just gonna bump that out to an even 5 feet at 60 inches. That way we got a little bit of wiggle room. And this piece here, instead of being this big, is actually gonna take up this much material. So I think what we'll do now is fold it this way. Now this is where our running board ends, but we want to have a bit of extra material that rolls underneath. So how much extra should we add? How about this much? That seems fine. And we'll flip this on this side. Go to our outside edge here. And there we go. We're going to need from here this big of an area to do our piece. So I'm going to trace that out square, and then we'll lay out our lines, and then start sewing our pieces in before we cut out our actual shape. All right, we've got running board 1 and running board 2, and now we've drawn our center line. So we got to do our lines out from there. And we want 2-inch tuck and roll strips. So we don't do a 2-inch one because we need, what are you doing? We don't want 2-inch lines because we got to suck up that 3/4 of an inch. So I've got a template here. 2-inch tuck and roll template, which is actually, how wide is it again? I don't remember now. It is like 2 11/16 wide, and just like our template from before, when we take into consideration our grease pencil line, if we trace this, we're going to end up at 2 3/4 of an inch line for line. When we suck that 3/4 of an inch up, we are left with 2 inches exposed. So I'm going to take this template now and draw all our lines all the way across. We needed 20 of them. There's all our lines drawn in, running board 1, running board 2. We'll cut this out now and glue it down to some scrim. All right, we've got our piece laid out on some 1/2-inch scrim. What is scrim? Scrim, or also sometimes called sew foam, it's a pretty kind of high density foam, but it's got this mesh on the back side. And you put your material on this side, and then when you sew your lines in, this mesh on the back side stops the thread just from pulling through. If you just sew on normal foam, the thread's just going to pull right through. So this is used for whenever you see pleats or like diamonds or anything like that sewn into a panel or a seat or something. This is what it's done with. This is 1/2-inch, which is what I usually use if I want like pretty puffy, thick stuff. It's also available in 1/4-inch, which I use on like door panels or on some seats where you don't want, like say you wanted to do diamonds, but you didn't want them to be super poofy. You would use 1/4-inch for that. And I think they do make it as thick as 3/4 inch, although I've never used it. 1/2-inch is as thick as I've ever used. So we're gonna lightly glue this down, and then we'll cut it out. Cut it in half, so we've got our running board 1 and running board 2, and then start sewing a whole bunch of lines. I'm just gonna lightly glue this down. The glue is literally just to hold it until we can start sewing. So we don't need a lot, because it's just kind of like a temporary thing. we're all ready to sew. This is a 1956 Singer 11G156. Every upholstery video I have, people always ask me what kind of machine this is. So there it is. There you have it. I'm not an expert on sewing machines. I always get people asking me, will this machine work? Will that machine work? And I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about sewing machines. This is really the only one I've ever had. What I do know about sewing machines is for upholstery, you want a walking foot. That means that this, as it goes up and down, it pulls the material through. You want this guy here. This is a reverse lever, and that allows you to do a lock stitch. You sew a little bit, push the button down, sew again, and it reverses it, and the stitch goes over top of the previous stitch, and that locks it in place. That's important for doing upholstery. And the other thing is you want to stick to a brand name, such as like Singer or Pfaff or Juki. That way, just like a welder, if you stick to like a Miller welder or a Lincoln welder, they're easy to get parts for, and people know how to service them. If you get like a weird offshore or machine that's not a common brand, it's going to be hard to find people to fix it and to work on it. For thread, I've just got some blue thread in there, and I'm using up some of these bobbins. And the reason for that is this blue thread, I have a whole bunch of it, and I rarely ever use it, so I just want to use it up instead of using thread that I do use a lot, because this first stitch that we're going to put in here is going to get folded over and sewn again, so you won't actually see this stitch. So that's why I'm using thread that I don't normally use that much. Basically, we're going to just sew all these lines in. Once we get all the first ones, the pleats you could say, sewn in, then we'll switch to this white thread, and that's when we'll do the fold and sew that we'll get rid of. It'll hide the stitch, giving us the true tuck and roll. There's step one done on both running board pieces. I have not sewn the last two lines. I always save those till the very last after I test fit it, just to make sure that everything is still okay. Because sometimes it gets weird, and when you think you need 20 lines, you actually only need 19, or sometimes you need more. So anyways, that's why I haven't left those. So as you can see, we've got our little indent here. Now, to get our tuck and roll, to get rid of this stitch line, we are going to fold it over like that, and then run another line down here. We're going to do that with all of them, and then when you open it back up, your line is gone. I already went ahead and put our white thread in the machine. Let's line this guy up. Fold it over. Oh, make sure we get these threads out of the way. That always gets weird when those get tangled in. Clamp our foot down. Did like 3 stitches. Hit the lever. And back up, and that's just going to lock it in so it doesn't come unthread while we're working on it. And now let's go ahead and sew this line all the way down. Get to the end, do another little lock stitch, Now when we open it up, our thread is gone. Beautiful. I'm gonna switch it back to time lapse and do the rest. Well, you can see how much this shrunk. That extra 15 inches we added on just went shoop. And it all is in there. So this one's done. We can toss it over there. I'm just gonna quickly go ahead and do this. I say quickly because it takes like 20 seconds on camera, but it probably takes a half an hour to do that. Then when we have them both done, we can move on to our end pieces and our piping. We've got all our tuck and roll done. No stitches visible. Isn't that look so cool? I ended up sewing the last one in. So we've got 20 lines in there right now. I drew 21, but we only used 20 as per our diagram, our pattern. So now we can start patterning this, which is basically, we are going to lay this down on top of here and trace out our shape. The two things that we got to add that our pattern does not have is where this seam is, and same with on these guys where our seam is. We need to add 3/8 of an inch from this line, and that's going to be our seam allowance. And the seam allowance is the little bit behind where the thread is. That's technically what like this would be. This is your seam allowance. And that is on there just so that there's like material behind the thread so the thread doesn't just like pull right out. And that 3/8 is based on the width of our foot here. See if we drop this down and it sits right on this line right here. That is 3/8 of an inch. So that's your seam allowance right there. It's 3/8. We got to add that on to the edges that we need to sew, which will be just the two ends. One end here, one end down here, and then on these guys here, just the one edge that needs to be sewn. The other part we have to add on that's not related to sewing, but more related to when we actually wrap the running board is this line right here that is on our pattern. That represents where the running board edge is. And we wanted it longer so that it will roll around underneath the running board, and then we have something to attach it to, and we don't have a raw edge on there, and it just looks really nice, just like on the bottom of your seat. Pretend this is a car seat, how it wraps around underneath like that. That's what we got to add on to there. We've got this little strip right here, which I've been saving forever because I knew that one day I would use this piece, and that day has come. Mark it on the calendar. But it's perfect for laying these guys out. We're going to need two, one direction, then we'll do a mirror image and do two, and that'll be for the passenger running board. Got all our patterns traced out with our 3/8 of an inch added for our seam allowance. Running board 1, running board 2. Now we're just going to cut all that stuff out, and we got to sew up a little bit of piping, and then we can sew it all together. all our pieces are cut out. You just watched me sew some piping up. Piping is really straightforward to do. You just cut some strips and then get some piping core, which is just this plastic tube. Wrap your strip around the tube and give it a little sew. There's a special foot in my machine for piping. It's basically got like a little channel that the pipe runs through. Really easy to make. So now we've got our piping for each end. We've got our tuck and roll top plate and our 2 end pieces. All we do now is just sew it together, making sure that our lineup marks are okay. For example, here's our driver's one, driver's front. We just got our lineup marks. Boom, boom. Actually, this isn't the front. This is driver's rear. This one says driver's front. Yeah, lineup marks. Boom, boom, boom. I think. Why does this look so? I bet, oh, hold on. Yeah, no, that's right, that's right. 1, 2, I don't know. I gotta double check my patterns here. It got a little weird on me and I don't know where. Okay, I'm back at the running board now, and it would appear that my pattern, I must have cut the end off. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention with the scissors or if I put a line in the wrong spot, but we're short like 2 inches, which means these pieces are also short if I take my lineup marks there. Good thing we caught that now and not before I started sewing. No big deal. We'll just remake these pieces a little bit longer. I just quickly made up a new pattern. So let's go cut this piece out, transfer it to some longer vinyl, and we'll just continue on like nothing ever happened. All right, we've got our 2.0 strips, or end pieces, or longer ones, or ones that did not get cut off on the end. I'm assuming that's what happened, is I wasn't paying attention and had the pattern laying on top of something else and cut through it with my scissors. It's happened before. Anyways, you can see when we hold our end up here, that lineup mark lines up, this lineup mark lines up, this lineup mark lines up, and then if we roll this around the edge, it ends right where our running board edge is. So that's how your lineup marks work. We're going to sew some piping in here, and then sew this on like that, so that when you open it all up, it looks beautiful. It's going to look really nice. Both running boards are sewn up. Went pretty well. I'm happy with it. So all that's left, I guess, is to install them on the running boards. However, it's Thanksgiving today. Canadian Thanksgiving. We have Thanksgiving. I don't even think it's in the same month as you guys in America. Not sure why, but whatever. It's Thanksgiving here in Canada. So I'm going to go eat some turkey, and we'll do this another day. Okay, well, let's see. I fit this a moment ago, and it fit pretty good. We got to give it a little stretch to get it to go on, but that's no big deal. Yeah. We are going to need the airline now that Shannon's done. She's working on a kitchen chair right now. Huh? Pretty cool. Red metal flake. So I think we're gonna spray a little bit of glue on here. Shannon already brought up how I said that I want them to be easily removable. And then I said I'm gluing them. And gluing it will be fine, because if you heat this glue up with like a heat gun, it warms it up. Am I even in frame? Oh yeah, we're in frame. We're good, I think. The running board is. All right, gonna blow a little bit of glue on our sides here. Actually, we'll give the whole thing a light coat of glue, and then give this a light coat of glue. Should I be spraying glue in front of you? No. Probably not. Yeah.
Let's get out of there.
Oh.
Thank you.
I'm spraying the glue on here first because then it can tack up. It takes a little longer to tack up on metal than it does on fabric, because fabric is, I don't know, it just absorbs a little easier. To hold our end pieces, I don't know if we'll need to or not, but at least we have them in case we do. I'm just gonna roll it. Roll it over so that all our marks line up. Okay, now, this is where it's going to get a little tricky. It's because we want this to roll right around. Okay, little dude, I need the air again. Okay. I think I'm done. I think we can take the air back. See how it looks. Boom. Look at that. One tuck and roll running board. Oh, we got a little wrinkle there. Yeah, is it good? Do you like it? Do you approve? So once Shannon's done with the airline again, we'll quickly do the other one, and then they're ready to install. Okay, pretty straightforward from here. We've still got our marks where our holes need to be, so we're just gonna punch our holes through the material using an awl and basically just bolt them up. All right, we've got both running boards on, fully bolted up. It's always amazing when you put a car together and every single bolt hole lines up. We've got every single running board bolt in. Our fenders are secured down now. Another item checked off the list. Isn't that great? I love it. I love it so much. All right, there we go. We've got our running boards done. Those are awesome. I'm so happy with that. I've always wanted a car with white tuck and roll running boards, and here we go. So I'm gonna leave the car up in the air right now because my next item on the list to get this car roadworthy is exhaust, and I want your guys' opinion on that. I've got these that used to be on my 47 Ford. The new owner, RL, he decided that he did not want to keep these on the car, so I've got them back again. And I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you like that? Or my original plan before I got these back was I was gonna run a full length lake pipe with a little turnout out the side, which I think I still might do, even though I really like these little kickstand pipes with the little cap on the end. That's gonna be all I have for exhaust on this car. I'm not gonna run it out the back. It's gonna be coming out the side there. So these caps will never be on. Is that weird to have this flange with no cap? Or would it look better with just a stainless pipe coming out, just like the ones that we built on Doug's 49 Chevy a couple years back, which Doug, you got to get those on. He still hasn't got those on. Anyways, let me know what you think about that. Let me know what you think about the running boards. And as always, make sure to check out the website, lgspeedcustom.com, for LG Speed and custom merch. If you haven't already subscribed, do it now. If you haven't already liked it, do it now. We'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching.